Now, this recipe for enkitum is sort of a combination of two dishes that I've actually made before. The first is jalebi, which is an Indian version of a sweet that can be found all over the Middle East and the Mediterranean.
Looks like it, yeah.
And the other is globi. Kato says that the dough is made the same way as globi.
Yeah, so basically it's possible that they were culturally influenced from a culinary perspective, because do remember that the Romans did conquer parts of the Middle East. You know, for instance, obviously the most famous one being Roman Judea, which then initially was an occupied territory, but then it becomes a prefecture of the province of Syria. But then there are other areas like that. So of course, as they enter certain scenarios, they are exposed to the culture, and so perhaps maybe that's where that came from.
And that's something that I made when I first started the channel, and is still one of the more popular recipes in the Tasting History cookbook. And that recipe says that the dough or batter is made of soft cheese and spelt flour. So that is what you will need for this recipe: 2 cups or 480 grams of ricotta cheese.
I appreciate ricotta. I love ricotta.
And 2/3 cup or 80 grams of spelt flour, though you can actually use any whole wheat flour that you want. Then 1/4 cup or 85 grams of honey, some optional white poppy seeds, a popular topping for any honey-covered dessert at the time, and about 1 liter of fat for frying. There were 2
A liter of fat. So he's using oil, of course, because again, that's a difference even in the Middle Ages. The available fat would vary regionally. So Southern Europe, Italy, Greece, it was more popular to use oil. But in Northern Europe, in fact, the preferred fat for cooking would be butter. Now, this changes both when it comes to time and region, but just as a general statement, it is how it was. If you think about it, in classical antiquity and in the Middle Ages, food was always seasonal. It's an obvious thing to say, but sometimes we are so used to the idea that we can eat whatever we want, whenever we want, wherever we want. This is probably a stark difference with the past. But in my opinion, do clip this, I think food was better. Maybe it would have tasted fresher, no chemicals, like it would spoil faster and you would have less availability and sometimes a famine or a drought. But I think it would have been fresher and more authentic if we were to go back and maybe go into a place where they're not raiding and whatnot. It would be nice.
Popular fats for frying at the time, either lard or olive oil, and I'm going to be using the latter. Specifically, the high-temperature cooking olive oil called Frizzle, sent to me from today's sponsor, Graza.
That was a smooth connection. I appreciate that. Let's get him some commissions.
Description, or click this QR code and use my code MAX10. And now, before we get frying, we need to actually make our batter.
Yes.
So start by sifting the flour into a large bowl and then add in the cheese and mix. And you want to mix it thoroughly until you have a nice, smooth, homogeneous batter. And
is this cow's ricotta? I'm actually asking Max in case he watches and then leaves a comment. Or is it buffalo ricotta? I wonder what type of ricotta it is.
Consistency is going to vary depending on the cheese and the flour that you use, but I found that you want the texture of like toothpaste. There is probably a better culinary description that I could use, a comparison, but I'm sticking with toothpaste. Then the recipe says that the batter should be...
I'll tell you this, he's great, he's fine. But there are some cooking channels that sometimes they annoy me profusely because they are like, they need to describe a dish and then they use a term that makes me want to vomit. So I'm like, could you please, you're so good at cooking, you know all the different things, you're so professional, and then you have to choose a word that does not make it sound appetizing. Does that make sense? I think that's important, right? The way the food looks, the way the food tastes, all of these are important. Not that I know how to run a successful culinary cooking channel, but I'm saying as the receiving end of a cooking channel, if the guy is making a sandwich and he's like, we're going to add a little olive oil and then we're going to add a little bit of vinegar, balsamic vinegar, in order to get it moist and lubricated. I'm like, come on, man. You couldn't think of something else?
Pushed through the hole in the bottom of a cup or a bowl. If you don't have that, then a piping bag is actually going to work best, and that's what I used. So fill a piping bag with the batter, and then it is time to fry. So heat a pan with either lard or olive oil until it reaches between 325 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Then through about a 1/4 inch hole in the bottom of the bag, pipe a spiral of dough.
Oh, that's how it's done. I don't know why. This is actually surprising me. I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting him to do this somewhere else and then move it and fry it. But I guess with the consistency, it would have been a mess. So this is that's very satisfying, isn't it?
This is what the author, Cato the Elder, calls the spira. Let it fry for about a minute on that first side, and if it seems to be stuck onto the bottom of the pan, just gently release it after about 30 seconds into frying. Any sooner and it won't be firm enough and it'll fall apart, but if you wait too long, it will burn.
Okay, I need to double check now. We're gonna see this. This looks really good, but I have to double check Miller's pronunciation. 1 second. Cato the Elder, did he use 1 R or 2 R's? Remember, we are on 4 minutes 54, guys, but I need to check this. He's wrong. It's spira. So this is a mistake that non-native speakers of Italian make, and of course, this is a Latin term. It's not Italian, but the same rule applies. If you have 1 R, the trill needs to be light. Spira, just like ragazza. It's a R. But if you have 2 R's, both in Latin and in Italian, that's when you make the sound he just made. So for example, ferro. So it's a longer sound and it's R. That's when you show off your rolling. And the perfect word to practice this, I'm telling Max Miller because everything else is perfect. And usually when he pronounces Latin, he does a very good job. So I'm only saying this because I know he has an excellent potential, and mostly for the audience anyways. It doesn't even matter. I'm just being pedantic. But I'm just saying it's nice because a word that it's perfect to practice this difference in pronunciation, long versus short sound, is the word Ferrari.